Headwaters Church, thanks for coming back wherever this video finds you, whether you're still in your morning sweatpants or if you've made it to your afternoon sweatpants. Thanks for sticking with us. We're going to work on question number 9 today. Before we get to question number 9, this is the third time that I've worked through this catechism in 3 different settings. And I'd just like to, this is where people start to bog down. So I'd like to encourage you, try and stick with it. When you start going through the 10 Commandments and there's like 5 questions in a row on the 10 Commandments, people start to slow down and it gets a little bit harder to get through. There's only one song for all of these. If you're using the app, which I'd really encourage you to do, the children's songs are very helpful regardless of your age. And some of them are a little more lively, just straight bangers. And others are a little bit slower. I just encourage you to keep working your way through those. Use the app, use all the tools available to you. Again, this is made to try and memorize, to try and work through it, to try and remember, to have your thoughts be caught up with these over and over again throughout the day. So when you find your mind idle, or you're just starting to daydream, go back to your question and answer for the day. What is God's commandments and the first, second, and third commandment? And even if it's the shorter children's version, or it doesn't even have to be exactly the wording that this catechism has, if you're able to just remember, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not have idols, and you shall not take the Lord's name in vain, you're accomplishing the goal. Allow your mind to dwell on those things. So I just want to encourage you, keep with it. Don't give up yet. And this morning, evening, wherever this finds you, question number 9. Question number 9, what does God require in the first, second, and third commandments? Answer, first, that we know and trust God as the only true and living God. Second, that we avoid all idolatry and do not worship God improperly. Third, that we treat God's name with fear and reverence, honoring also his word and works. So I would guess the 10 Commandments is probably a fairly familiar portion of the scriptures for you. And if it isn't, I encourage you to familiarize yourself. And we find these first 3 commandments as very specific and guiding our ability to be in proper relationship with God, to view God with the honor and glory that he deserves. So I guess that the 10 Commandments are probably fairly familiar to you. And if they're not, I'd encourage you to familiarize yourself, to work your way through Exodus chapter 20, understand the context, what's going on there, and to become very familiar with what's happening in the 10 Commandments. And as you hopefully saw in the video last week, these first 3 and the fourth one are very vertical commandments. They're about your relationship with God, and they're intended to enable you and lead you to delight, enjoy, and glorify God more effectively. Don't have other gods before me. Do not make idols. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. These things lead you to a proper respect and honoring of God. If you know Exodus chapter 20, which is where Moses goes up on Mount Sinai and receives the law, you might remember that while he is getting this instruction, the nation of Israel is at the base of the mountain. And they don't do a great job while Moses is gone. They get a little persnickety is probably the right word. They forget oh so quickly. And so they come to Aaron, Moses' brother, and they say, Moses is taking a long time. We want a god. And they throw all their gold and jewelry in, and they fashion for themselves a golden calf. And in Exodus chapter 32, while Moses is about to come down from the mountain with the very instruction of the 10 Commandments and the rest of the law, Exodus 32 reads as this. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, and they gathered themselves up to Aaron and said to him, "Make us gods who shall go before us." As for this, Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what's become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off your rings of gold and the ears of that are in the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Now there's obviously quite a few violations going on here. Not a great moment in the nation of Israel's history. We've pretty much violated all three of these commandments. I know they haven't officially received them yet, but they know, right? They've put not only another god before God, they've made an idol, and there's little doubt that they've taken his name in vain just by ascribing to this idol that they've made the actions of God. So they do a few things here. You see that he says, "This is the God that led you up out of Egypt." That's a problem. They've ascribed the works of God Almighty to an idol in their life. We want a God that will go before us. You already have that. How do you forget how you came to the mountain? And we're so quick to forget. Let us not think that we are above this. If you look, if you have your Bible, you can go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And in this section, Paul pulls in the nation of Israel's failure with idolatry. Specifically, the very thing, he's not talking about the golden calf, but them eating manna in the desert and walking around and not trusting God. They've made idols of other things. They may not be actual physical idols. But he writes in 1 Corinthians 10, starting verse 6, "Now these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were. As it's written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. You must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come." So the New Testament takes this struggle with idolatry and says, listen, these things were cataloged to be a reminder to you not to go down that same path. Church, when we look at prescriptions against idolatry, we probably not set up physical idols, but we have frequently not trusted in God, have we not? Can we find several examples in our current situation where we could say we've fallen to idolatrous behavior? Whether that's in terms of our social status that we've made an idol out of. No doubt about it that there's status that drives us and that can lead us to certain decisions that we've put in front of valuing God. Whether that's in our sense of security. I don't know if anybody's felt a little less certain about their future in the last couple months or so. Don't make an idol out of it. God holds all things. Or if you've made an idol quite literally out of social interaction. That might be a new one. I've not really generally thought of that, but when we've been forced out of social situations, I realize how much I depend on other people. And you have to know, other people, that is a good thing. Fellowship is a good and proper thing, but we can take any good and proper thing and elevate it to a place that it becomes idolatrous. We have to grapple with these things. And when we look at the Ten Commandments, are reminded there is only God. No other gods before him. Do not make any idols in your life, and don't take his name in vain. We are always right on the cusp of violating these things. We are not too different. Paul has to remind us. These were written for your instruction. If that's the case, what can we do? How do we apply the Ten Commandments? It doesn't feel like it's enough just to say, don't make idols. What sort of practical steps can we implement in our lives to help prevent us from idolatry? I'm just going to suggest one to you in this video. One practical suggestion for fighting idolatry in your life. It's very simple. Be intentional to remember. I take this in two different ways. First, what you already saw in 1 Corinthians 10. Be intentional to remember the failures of saints past and of your own past. Don't forget where you've dropped the ball and how you've succumbed to idolatry before. Don't allow that to slip from your memory and think, I've got it now. You are frail, as I'm frail. As we all are, we're prone to sin. Don't deceive yourself. Remember. Second, don't just remember your failures or the failures of other saints. Remember the faithfulness of God. For the nation of Israel, you remember, again, from the video last week and from question 6, this is all built on the work of God. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. So for Israel, the command to not have other gods, to not be in idolatry, to not take the Lord's name in vain, is built on their relational status with God as remembered in the Exodus. For you and I, we don't turn back to the Exodus, we look to the cross. And we find the faithfulness of God over and over and over again. That is the reason you are given the Lord's Supper. To not forget. And we quickly forget. So we have to come back to the table over and over again. We remember that God was faithful for us in Jesus Christ. We remember what he has done, and in so doing, we put up barriers to idolatry in our lives. Church, you need to be a remembering people. If you want to be someone who fights the temptation of idolatry, work it into your life to be a person who remembers. What does God require in the first, second, and third commandments? First, that we know and trust God as the only true and living God. Second, that we avoid all idolatry and do not worship God improperly. Third, that we treat God's name with fear and reverence, honoring his word and works.